mechanized and moronic man moves toward extinction. Machines get better and better. Illogical beliefs persist.
Hi, my name is Dean Fougere, and thank you for checking out my video attempting to garner some support for March Against Monsanto 2016. In this video, I will be laying out why I am protesting against Monsanto and have done so in the past, and why I think you should come out and join us as well. So please watch this video, and at the end of this, if you feel like you are sick of Monsanto and their lies, please come out and join us on May 21st, 2016 in a city near you. And I know it's not ideal to take a day off from work to go out and protest, but this is about your health and your children's health, and some things are just worth protesting, and I don't want to be the only one screaming about this in 5 years from now. Because as Noah Chomsky told us, as long as the general population is passive, apathetic, diverted to consumerism or hatred of the vulnerable, then the powerful can do as they please, and those who survive will be left to contemplate the outcome. And we can already see what the outcome is going to be from a completely sick and dumbed down public that consumes GMOs without knowing what's inside of the food, because the industry is fighting hard against even labeling the food that's GMO. So what is the reason we are marching against Monsanto? It is because they are introducing GMO crops to our environment. So GMOs, or genetically modified organisms, are organisms whose genetic material has been artificially manipulated in a laboratory through genetic engineering, or GE. This relatively new science creates unstable combinations of plant, animal, bacteria, and biogenes that do not occur in nature or through traditional crossbreeding methods. And just to give you an idea of what percentage of the foods in America are GMO already without anyone basically knowing, because of the passage of things such as the Dark Act, which attempted and got blocked by the Senate to deny the Americans the right to know what's in their food. So corn, which is basically in everything in America, is 88% GMO, and soy, another major crop, is 94% GMO. So we can see here an article from non-GMOproject.org, and it talks about how 80% of the food in America is GMO. So if you're eating out at dinner, you're eating any food that isn't stamped non-GMO, certified, or organic, then you are eating GMOs, because basically 80% or more of the food in America is GMO. And they don't have to label it because they've been fighting labeling for so long, even though by the end of this you won't want them to label it, you'll want them to remove it entirely. So the first answer is buy organic or non-GMO certified food, because voting with your dollars is the thing that the elite fear the most. So it's extremely important to understand what we are eating, because as they've always said, you are what you eat. Well, we now know that is even more true than ever before, because a new field of science called epigenetics describes how what we are eating is actually changing our DNA. And though this fits into a much larger conspiracy that I may get to in a later video, this video is focusing on the food industry. And the food industry itself has become extremely sick, and that's why the population has become sick. So as this documentary on the screen, Food Inc. shows us, the entire food industry itself is corrupt. And though our march focuses on Monsanto, what we're really marching against is a corrupt food industry. We focus on Monsanto because of their connections to the government agencies and how people like Michael Taylor go from Monsanto to the FDA head and the other things that Monsanto has done, but really we're talking about a sick and corrupted food industry itself. So why Monsanto? Well, as the documentary The World According to Monsanto highlights, Monsanto is one of the most evil corporations to ever exist, and the fact that they are in charge of the food industry is not only frightening, but also very, very dangerous to our health. So please go watch this documentary if you haven't seen it already. So in response to documentaries like the last one, Monsanto has gone out, and as this article on hacked.com exposes, hired internet trolls in order to change public opinion by posting and parroting various things that they pump out, various propaganda. Just like, you know, the tobacco industry did back in the 50s, they hire fake scientists to say that cigarettes are actually good for you and doctors smoke cigarettes. And a great example of one of these fake scientist internet trolls is Kevin Folta, who's even come after me for posting anti-GMO stuff on Twitter. And he's also created a fake radio show where he interviewed himself in a fake voice to talk about the benefits of GM products. And you can see here on the screen an email from him and Monsanto talking about how he's going to give them, and I quote, a promise a solid return on the investment for them giving him $50,000 to promote GM products as actual science. This is the type of scientist that Monsanto relies on to say their products are safe. So when he's not creating fake radio shows to interview himself and producing fake reports that promote GM products, he spends his time, that's Kevin Folta, going around attacking food activists like the Food Babe for getting major corporations to actually tell us what's in their products, such as, you know, the fact that Subway was putting basically the same thing you find in rubber shoes in their bread. So this lady's done lots of good work, and she had to submit a FOIA request because Kevin Folta spent so much time harassing her because she was, you know, exposing GM product. So one of the main problems with GM foods or GMO foods is the fact that they make them Roundup resistant or grow Roundup inside of themselves, as they'll say themselves. And basically Roundup has been proven by the World Health Organization to be a carcinogen or a cancer-causing agent. And they cover their food in Roundup because they make the corn and the soy what's called Roundup Ready, which means it's more resistant to Roundup than any other plants on the planet. And that allows them to completely cover their plants in Roundup and they won't die, and all the weeds die, making it easier and more profitable for farmers. So Monsanto, the main producer of Roundup, is also the main producer of GMO products. So they make the products resistant to their own Roundup, and then they put it out on the market and have everyone ingesting Roundup even though it causes cancer, and I'm sure they knew this before they released it. Or if they didn't, they're the most ignorant people on the planet. And of course, they're not wanting labeling on this stuff because as soon as anyone realizes this, they'll stop eating it. So as Monsanto continues to fight labeling and pushing their GM products in society, they're also manipulating the internet with their trolls. So what is their definition of a GMO? I mean, let's just be fair and have Monsanto have their own say. Let's see what they have to say and see if they address all of the concerns we have about the fact that Roundup and growing Roundup inside of a plant that you can't wash off before you eat might not be such a good idea since it causes cancer.
GMO seeds are just one of the many ways Monsanto is helping farmers sustainably grow enough for a growing world. But they're also, without a doubt, the one we hear the most about. What are they? Why do some farmers choose to grow them? Are they really that scary? Give it a minute. GMOs are genetically modified organisms. When it comes to plants, there are 8 GMO crops. GMOs are adapted with beneficial traits that help them thrive in their environment. Think drought-tolerant corn or pest-resistant soybeans that need less bug spraying. That helps farmers, and better harvests benefit everyone, impacting what's available at the store and what we can put on our plates. Here's how it works. Plants get instructions for growth and development from their DNA, which contains thousands of genes. Researchers zero in on the gene containing specific instructions for a desirable trait. A copy of that gene goes into the DNA of host plant cells, which are grown into mature plants. Only after years of rigorous testing are the seeds from those plants made available to farmers. No syringes, no frankenfood. And much faster than traditional plant breeding methods alone. And with food demand expected to grow significantly by 2050, GMO seeds can help farmers sustainably grow enough. That's a lot to cover in a minute. So if you still have questions, check out discover.monsanto.com.
Oh, I still got questions. Trust me, Monsanto. Any politician or scientist who tells you these GMO products are safe is either very stupid or lying. David Suzuki, geneticist. And the problem here is that Monsanto never even addresses any of the issues or concerns that are brought up against their products. They just call us crazy conspiracy theorists and take a picture of someone from the 1950s and overlay it over a screaming person. So why are they actually pushing GM products on society? Let's hear from this next person on what the actual plan is. And this is what it's really all about. All the eugenics programs, all the vaccines, and all the GMOs. Bertrand Russell. Gradually, by selective breeding, the congenital differences between rulers and ruled will increase until they become almost different species. A revolt of the plebs would become as unthinkable as an organized insurrection of sheep against the practice of eating mutton. Diet, injection, and injunctions will combine from a very early age to produce the sort of character and the sort of beliefs that the authorities consider desirable. Any serious criticism of the powers that be will become psychologically impossible. This is them telling you that they're going to control society using these 3 different types of things to create a dumbed down class of people. So how does Monsanto get their GM products, which have absolutely no evidence proving they're safe in long-term studies, into the food industry? You're looking at the answer on the screen, and that's the revolving door between the federal government and this multinational corporation called Monsanto, where they basically leave their position at Monsanto, take up the position at the FDA, and then approve any of the frankenfoods that Monsanto creates. Yes, frankenfoods, I said it. Revolving door number 1, Michael Taylor, former Vice President Monsanto, Deputy Commissioner of the FDA. Nothing more to say. As you can see here, the president is nothing more than a puppet, and I am sure once they take office, they're sat down by the 4th branch and told that everything they promised on the campaign trail is not going to happen, and they're going to do as told. So as you can see here, Obama was campaigning on the fact that he was going to help us get genetically modified foods labeled, because we at least have a right to know what we're eating. But after becoming president, he does as told, as every president's done since JFK, and helps basically protect Monsanto from having to label their food, and places Michael Taylor as the head of the FDA. So the genetically modified foods, which are making this entire country fat, in my opinion, are, also creating a massive health epidemic from obesity in this country, and diabetes and other things of that nature. And the frankenfoods that they are making, I think, directly contribute to this, because they make the food fatter quicker, which also makes the person who then eats the food later fatter quicker. Now let's see this next frankenfish they made.
A genetically modified fish with spare parts is inches away from our food supply chain. The FDA is giving General Electric the go-ahead on an application that's been pending now for 2 years. Just what is this so-called frankenfish anyway? Well, it's the biotech industry's genetically engineered fish that grows twice that of the normal rate of a real fish. That means it goes into the consumer market faster and at higher rates. This lab animal is loaded with questions that science just can't answer. The biggest one, how does this affect the health of somebody who eats it? Here's what we do know. The lab test of only 6 of these fish showed an elevated level of the growth hormone IGH1, which has been linked to breast, colon, and prostate cancer. With the FDA's approval, this would be the first genetically modified animal allowed in the U.S. for consumption. This is important because this fish, it sets the regulatory precedent for every GMO animal after it. Consumer watchdog groups say not so fast. A concern that GE shares with them, this modified fish could escape into the wild, survive, and actually reproduce there. They say that they're only going to create the female salmon for now with 3 sets of DNA instead of the normal 2, rendering the fish infertile in 95% of the cases. The non-sterile fish may still reproduce with real fish in the wild, creating untold amounts of damage in the environment. Without GMO labeling, consumers would not be able to avoid the new fish when it arrives in grocery stores and fish markets. Do we really want to eat something that's genetic integrity is so questionable the company making it is afraid it will reproduce with a real fish? The next time you're at that fancy organic grocery store about to purchase an expensive piece of salmon, you may want to ask yourself, is this fish actually fish? In Washington, Margaret Howell.
Shocking, a GM company doesn't care about the safety of their food and is just pushing things for profit. And as we can see here, Monsanto said, Monsanto should not have to vouch for the safety of biotech food. Our interest is in selling as much of it as possible. Assuring its safety is the FDA's job. And that's what this is all about. Selling as much of their food as possible, controlling as much of the market as possible, suing farmers if their GM products, quote unquote, contaminate their fields, and forcing Americans to eat their crap even though it's making them sick. It's disgusting. And I don't know about you, but I grew up eating stuff like Kellogg's Corn Flakes, and we ate this stuff even though Monsanto knew that the GMO corn, the BT corn used in it, is actually registered as a pesticide. You can go Google that and look at the number there on the screen, number 524-581. And these products basically destroy any good probiotics in your gut and cause all types of problems with the digestive system. And as we know, something around 80% of the diseases in our system start in the gut. So maintaining a good, healthy digestive system is extremely important to our health. And these products are literally killing the animals on the planet like honeybees, frogs, and fish, and now us. This next quote is extremely important. Our gut bacteria contains the same metabolic pathway found in plants that is targeted and disrupted by Roundup. Is it any wonder that leaky gut syndrome, IBD, colitis, and other gastrointestinal diseases have spiked since the onset of Roundup-ready GMO crops? No. And it's also linked to the bee colony collapse disorder because the bees are dying by eating the GM crops in the field. There was an extremely important study that came out by Dr. Seralini that showed the GM effects of rats on 120 days, and it just showed rats growing huge lumps and getting massive cancer. And Monsanto responded to that by suing the journal, forcing them to release it, and then they put a former employee, Richard E. Goodman, at that journal, and then Monsanto did their own pseudoscience test to disprove this. And all of that's been completely debunked by actual scientists, not Monsanto paid scientists like Kevin Folta, who I showed you earlier. Because GM products are absolutely horrible for you and no one should be eating them, just like these rats. An extremely important thing for everyone who's watching this to do is to start to take probiotics, because probiotics are one of the best ways to fight back against this bad food system that we really have no choice because everywhere we go, it's GM products. Go ahead, you can try to buy organic, but basically everything on the shelf these days has some sort of GMO, some sort of aspartame, food dye, something in it because the entire food industry is completely sick. When you have a fish and the fish is sick, you don't take the fish out and pump it full of drugs to make it feel better. You clean the fish's bowl and try to see if that helps it, because the environment is what's causing the fish to be sick. And the same thing is happening in our country. It's the food we are eating that is causing the rise of diabetes, the rise of cancer, and all these things of that nature. If we weren't ingesting the chemicals, the GMOs, the Roundup, and all of that, we would be a much healthier society and spending far less on a health system that has gone completely out of control. It's become an industry, not a way to take care of people. And the food industry feeds into that sick health industry. You really have to ask yourself, why is our food being made and modified by the world's largest pesticide manufacturer to resist their own pesticides? And we're all ingesting this. At what point are you going to stand up and demand that this stuff isn't on the shelves and stop eating it? For me, the time to go out and march against this food industry has already come. But in order to basically push you over the edge, I'm going to show you a couple of clips from different things I found online showing you behind the scenes looks at the food industry. And if you are eating, I would suggest stop eating or finish before watching this, because by the time you're done, you're going to be out there marching with us on May 21st. The first one's from Food Inc. and shows chicken industrial farming and how chickens have gotten so fat they can't even stand. So I couldn't actually use the clip due to copyright reasons, but I'm going to narrate over pictures of it for you. So this lady's talking out despite the fact that she's going to be economically hurt later. and I'll explain why they do that, but she wanted to expose what's going on in the chicken farming. And what she exposes is that the chicken farming industry is completely sick. They stuff these houses, normally kept completely in the dark, full of chickens that never move more than a few inches a year, and the chickens just eat feed and get stuffed by antibiotics, and if they get sick or die, they just drag the dead bodies out. It's absolutely disgusting. Because the chicken's feed is full of antibiotics, and because they're stuck with different hormones in order to make them grow much quicker than they normally should, the chickens grow too fast to support their own weight, and many of them can only take a few steps before falling over, and a lot of them just die, and nothing's done about that. They're just removed. Over time, more chickens die because the bugs grow resistant to the antibiotics, and the lady herself has now grown an allergy to antibiotics because of their overuse in this farming practice. The big companies like Purdue used to hire African American workers because they had no rights, so they'd just trample on them and they'd never complain. And now they're hiring illegal immigrants because illegal immigrants have no rights and they can't complain. So they pay them nothing and they have them go in and pick up these chickens in the middle of the night because the chickens are calmer in the middle of the night. And it doesn't matter if the chickens are sick or whatever, they just take them up and throw them in the cages and move on. They do not care whatsoever about what they're doing. For letting her coops be filmed, this lady was basically fired by the company she worked for, and that's what they do to farmers who speak out or let the truth be known. She explains how the big companies force them to buy equipment and force them to take these certain farming practices on, and if they don't, they get their contracts canceled, just as what happened to her. And all of these farmers are completely in debt to the big banks who actually run these big farming companies anyways. So this is the situation, and they really can't do anything about it without your help. Yeah, none of these people are marching down to KFC for a chicken sandwich after seeing stuff like that, and neither should you. In fact, what I'm going to show you next should worry you even more than what I just showed you in that last film, because what they're also doing is genetically modifying animals in extremely weird ways. And in China, one of these companies has genetically modified a cow to produce human breast milk. Yeah, that's right. They've put human genes inside of a cow, creating a literal chimera.
Humans have been drinking it for millennia. Wholesome, healthy, full cream milk. But this dairy in Beijing isn't quite what it seems. These cows have all been genetically modified, and this is human breast milk. The Chinese scientists responsible successfully inserted the human breast milk gene into a cow embryo and then implanted it into a surrogate. The result is a transgenic herd of 300, and milk the scientists claim is healthier than the bovine variety. The human breast milk produced by the cows is antibacterial and helps boost the immune system. With government approval, it could be on supermarket shelves within 3 years. You may find the idea hard to swallow, but these dairy workers disagree. They say it's stronger and sweeter than cow's milk. It's a world first in a country that's leading the stampede to embrace genetically modified food.
The scientists who created this herd have also produced animals that are resistant to mad cow disease, as well as beef cattle that are genetically modified for more nutritious meat.
Critics say the risks of transgenic food aren't yet fully understood. But while the West worries about the dangers and morality of genetic modification, China says those scruples are misplaced.
There are 1.5 billion people in the world who don't have enough to eat. It's our duty to develop science and technology, not to hold it back. We need to feed people first, before we consider ideals and convictions.
China's pushing the boundaries of genetic modification, seemingly unperturbed by any ethical concerns. Holly Williams, Sky News, Beijing.
So I won't be feeding any of my babies human breast milk from a cow, a genetically modified cow. But if you want to go do that, go right ahead. I'll be out here marching to at least get milk labeled so that I know I'm not eating milk from some cow that has some crazy gene in it. If you don't think that's a problem, then, you know, we can have a talk about that. But I think it's a massive problem to at least know what's in the milk that we're drinking, or our babies are drinking. Now, in this next clip, I'm going to show you it's all about industrial farming practices and how those industrial farming practices have led to animal abuse and confined cages and cows that are so sick they get dragged through the mud before being brought to huge, massive slaughterhouses where they're all mixed together with hundreds of other cows. And that's why I buy organic, because organic doesn't come from these types of things, but you can go ahead and buy your cheap meat if you want.
An investigation by the Humane Society of the United States uncovers abuse of down dairy cows, cows too sick or too injured to stand, at a California slaughterhouse. What's more, the meat is being served to children through the National School Lunch Program.
These animals are so terribly abused. You know, when they're dragged or pushed with a bulldozer or forklift, that's just inhumane handling. It's gross mistreatment. It violates the law. And these animals are going into the school lunch program. They're going onto the plates of children.
The Hallmark Slaughterhouse supplies the Westland Meat Company, which processes the meat from the cows. Westland is a top supplier of ground beef to the school lunch program, and it proudly displays its award as the Supplier of the Year during 2004 and 5. 27 million pounds of meat from Westland were shipped to California, Texas, and 34 other states last year. Taxpayers footed nearly $40 million in contracts for Westland to provide meat to needy families and the elderly, as well as to school children.
You can see all this manure encrusting along the hide.
Public health expert Dr. Michael Greger points out the hazards of slaughtering down cattle.
At slaughter, when they're cutting through this hide, can introduce these fecal pathogens, Salmonella, E. coli, into the meat. Kind of playing, Russian roulette. When even one of these animals gets in the food supply, it can get into the meat of a number of hamburgers.
The USDA says downed cows are unfit for people to eat, but workers at the slaughterhouse will do anything to get these animals into the food supply.
The meat industry tries to squeeze as many profits out of these animals as possible. Even animals too sick or injured to walk are animals they want to turn a profit on.
By allowing downed cattle into the food supply, we're increasing the risk of human exposure to mad cow disease, Salmonella, E. coli, and other food poisoning bacteria.
This investigation has brought a terrible problem to light. Illegal conduct at slaughterhouses, downer livestock being abused. It's just irresponsible and reckless for the USDA to allow this process to occur.
So they feed the cows corn instead of grass, and they pump them full of drugs, and they wonder why everyone in America is sick and fat, except for the people that don't eat GMOs and eat grass-fed beef and things of that nature, and cage-free chickens. And you wonder why this stuff is important. Now you know. So why don't you get a mask and come out and join us, or just get a sign and come out and join us on May 21st. And if I haven't convinced you yet, if that isn't enough, the food industry is just completely sick, and please do not buy anything from Smithfield, because the next video I'm going to show you is one of the most disturbing videos I've ever seen about the food industry, and it's still ongoing today. So Smithfield Foods, you're welcome. You're absolutely disgusting.
What we found are extraordinarily inhumane conditions at Smithfield Foods, the largest pork producer in the entire world. I still remember the first time I ever laid eyes on a gestation crate facility and seeing the helplessness of these animals who have done nothing to deserve the fate that they're enduring. Suffering inside of these crates is just absolutely devastating. The Humane Society of the United States has investigated one of Smithfield's breeding operations. This facility represents what gestation crate confinement is. Open wounds, pressure sores, infections, bleeding gums from biting the bars so much, and these animals aren't even being cared for with individualized veterinary attention. Regardless of how the system is managed, these pigs are barely able to move even an inch their entire lives. They're unable to walk around, to turn around. It causes them to quite literally go insane. And this is one of the reasons why so many animal scientists and veterinarians have condemned this extreme confinement practice.
Smithfield, about, I would say, 3 weeks ago, made an announcement that we had made a decision to phase out the use of sow gestation crates in all of our company-owned farms over a 10-year period.
Smithfield committed publicly to phasing out gestation crates within a 10-year period, receiving a lot of public praise for doing so. Now, just a couple years later, the company is saying that it no longer can meet its own very generous self-imposed deadline. That's completely unacceptable. Many other pork companies, such as, let's say, Maxwell Foods, which is one of the biggest pork producers in the country, is already 100% gestation crate-free. Cargill, another major pork producer, is already 50% gestation crate-free. The American Farm Bureau, the primary agribusiness lobby in the United States, funded a poll in which they found that an overwhelming majority of Americans find gestation crates to be inhumane. This is one of the reasons why 7 states in the country have already banned this practice, why all 27 member nations of the EU have banned the practice. Gestation crates are a practice of the past, not of the future, and Smithfield ought to be speeding up that trend rather than slowing it down.
So please come out and join us during the March Against Monsanto, because while the mainstream media does its best to ignore us, we are actually having major wins against the system. In various states, such as Vermont, they're passing labeling laws, and the US Senate just voted down the DARK Act because people are against it, and they know this, and they're worried about their constituents turning on them. So as the media tries to ignore it, we are winning against the system, and GM foods are losing because people are buying organic and voicing their support. So that's why you need to come out and join us. Because the March Against Monsanto isn't about, going out there and forcing Monsanto to disappear. It's about going out there and having a whole bunch of people see us and say, why are all these people protesting against GMO foods and Monsanto? And then they go out and they research it and they stop eating it, and we change the system. If you want more information on how to join the march, go to marchagainstmonsanto.com, and on there you can find all the information you need. And just from my own experience, last year there was about 60 to 70 people at the Boston one, and it was a very nice experience. Everyone just sort of standing around listening to different speakers talk about the various things that are ongoing in our local community in order to fight back against this food industry system. And I put some of those videos up on my page from last year, so please check them out. On the March Against Monsanto website, there's a spreadsheet that you can download that shows all the events where March Against Monsanto is happening on May 21st worldwide. So if you want to see if it's going on in your local city, you can look it up there, and if it isn't already going on in your local city, you you can organize it and add it to this list so that other people can come and join you. And we really appreciate any support. I was there last year and the year before, and I'll be at the one in Boston this year. And keep checking this spreadsheet because it gets updated as it gets closer to the event. I absolutely believe we can still change the system, but we can only do it with your help. So please come out and join us, because it will be different in the future, but only with your help.
Are they really that scary?
Lulz. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope to see all of you out there on May 21st, 2016. I'll be coming back and making videos about the interviews I'll be conducting at the march, about why people are there, and I'll hopefully be filming some of the talks. And thank you again so much for watching, and I'll be back with more videos in the near future, so please like, subscribe, share. And if you have any comments, please leave them, because I always love an open forum. Bye.